Hello friends, welcome to Joy of Life. So before we proceed with this episode, what I would like to tell you is that if you have not seen the system design introduction video wherein we have discussed about the architecture of this mini project that we are building, I would highly recommend you to check the same. I will leave a link to the description as well so that you can click, check the same and then get back onto the video. In the last episode, we have played around with the Docker container of Redis and we have tried out a handful of commands. So in the last episode, we have created a Docker container out of the Redis image and we have played with a lot of commands and we have tried and tested them out. So today we are going to incorporate those changes into our application. So we are going to go ahead and update our URL feeder service. So in our service, what we have been doing all this while is going to the database and checking that if the URL is there or not. So before going to the database, what we are going to do is we are going to introduce Redis. So we'll first check in Redis, and if it doesn't exist, then we are going to go ahead and check in the database. So integrating Redis into our application, we have to do a lot of changes, right? So we are going to look at those changes and understand them in full details. So the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to search with the latest Redis Maven dependency, and we are going to go to the site and get the dependency and put it to our POM file. So we are going to use the latest one, 6.1.2. So you can just get it. So what we are going to do is we are going to open our POM file and add the dependency first. So the next step is to go to the Maven tab and re-import the dependency, so it will go ahead and download it. Now the next thing that we are going to do is we have already created a bunch of service, one for Kafka, one for URL. So we are going to create a new service over here. We are going to call it cache service. Okay, so first what we'll do is we'll add the annotation over here. Since this is a service class, so we'll put the service annotation over here, and there are a couple of changes that we'll require. And so before that, what we'll do is we'll go to our properties file and we'll add some properties. So the first property is our TTL and it is in days, so we are going to keep it for 1 day. And the second configuration is for the cache URL or the Redis URL, so it's going to connect to the local host and it's running at 6379, and we are going to connect to the 0th or the first data or the only database that we have or the data store, right? So that's all from the configuration part. What we'll do first is we'll put a logger, and now what we are going to do is we are going to get those two values from our properties file into the variables. So we have all the configurations for Redis into our class now, and now what we need is to create a Redis client, right? So we are going to go ahead and create a Redis client, and we are going to initially keep it as null. The next thing that we need is a stateful connection, and we are having string as our key and value will be the URL object, right? So this is a important part, right? We need to store the object, so we have to have some mechanism in order to serialize and deserialize it back, right? So we are going to look at it in a moment. First, let me create this. So if you remember when we looked at the documentation the other day, if you remember, what we need is to create a Redis client and a stateful connection, but here they were dealing with string, so it was simple. So we need to establish these two things on when the application starts, and we need to close the connection and shut down the client, right, when the application terminates, right? So we have to take care of that in some way or the other. So what we are going to do over here is we are going to create two methods over here. So let's call it a init method, and the other method over here, let's call it destroy. So this init method is going to get called when the class has been instantiated, right? So what happens is Spring is going to go ahead and create this class for you, right? So what we are going to do is once the class is created, I want this method to get called, who will take care of establishing this connection, right? And just before the destructor or the class is being unloaded from the Spring application, we need to call this destroy method. Spring provides a way to do it, so we call it post construct in Spring. So we have to just provide the annotation that it's a post construct. So once the class has been constructed, this method will get called. And similarly, this one will be pre-destroy. So just before the object is being destroyed, this method will be called. And here we will take care of our initialization and uninitialization, or closing of the connection, you can say, right? Since both of them are initialized with a null, we are first going to put this over here. So we are going to check if it is not null, then we are going to do a close over here. And similarly, if Redis client is not null, we are going to do a Redis client dot shutdown. Okay, so we are good with the destroy part. So now we need to take care of the init method, and we will need certain things to be done over here. So let's add a log before that. So pre-destroy called, and let's say post init called, right? So we'll just to see that they appears, right? Nothing else. So we have got all the connection parameters. Now we need to establish the connection. So we are going to use a very easy method over here. So we are going to just go ahead and create, and we have the URL over here, right? So we'll just do a Redis client.create, and we are done. Okay, now I have to get the stateful connection ready. So what we'll do is, we have the client ready, so we are going to do a connect. Okay, now the problem comes, this will not work, right? Because we have said that we need a string and the URL. What happens over here is, we need to provide a way and tell Redis that this is the way you go ahead and serialize and deserialize my object, right? Many applications will have many needs, right? Different needs for all of them. So we are going to go ahead and understand how we are going to do it. That's the most crucial part of this application. So basically we are talking about this URL object, right? So the first thing is, we want to serialize and deserialize it. So we have to implement serialization, right? Okay. And now what we are going to do is, we are going to go ahead and create a codec. So Redis provides a way to create a codec, so that we can pass the codec and it can be used. So let's create a package for codec. And now what we are going to do is, we are going to create a Java class, and let's call it, so we are going to create a URL serialization codec class, and we are going to implement this codec over here. So we are going to go ahead and use the Redis codec over here, and we need to provide the type, right? So we have a string and we have a URL type. So we have to provide implementation for all of these. So we are doing it on two things. One is the key, the other is the value. And so we have two methods for each: decode key, encode key, decode value, encode value, right? So these are the four functionalities. So what it will do is, Redis will go ahead and call my code, this code over here, and it's going to use this in order to get the object serialized and deserialized, right? And now if you see that for our key, we are not doing anything, we are keeping it as string, right? So what we are going to do is, we are going to use an encoding over here. So let's take a constant and put the encoding in place. So private final char set, and we are going to use let's call it char set only, and we are going to use a standard char set of UTF-8, right? Okay, now to implement the decode key, what we'll do is, we'll use the char set that we have just created, and we are going to do a decode based on UTF-8, and whatever is received, that is received in byte buffer, and we are just going to put it into string. So basically nothing we are doing over here. Whatever we have received in bytes, we are just doing a UTF-8 and getting it as a string, right? Nothing much over here. And similarly for the key, when we are going to encode it, we are not going to do anything. We are just going to do a char set dot encode and 8. So again, the encoding is UTF-8 encoding that we are doing for the key. So both our encode and decode function remains pretty simple over here. And now we need to understand what we are going to do for our values. So for the decode and the encode part, we'll go ahead and use the default implementation what Redis has given us. So if you look at Redis's repository, we will see that they have given us the methods over here. So we are going to do the same, and I will definitely explain you through the same, like what we are doing over here. So with that, we have our codec ready over here. So we have implemented all the methods. So byte buffer, it's not doing anything. It's taking a URL object, creating a byte array output string, wrapping it into the object output string, and then it's writing the object into it, right? Just the object that we have passed in. And at the end, it is just wrapping it into a byte buffer. So nothing much over here. Pretty much templated code, you can say. And for decode, again, you are receiving a byte buffer this time, so you are creating an array of that size, and again, so your byte buffer will have the data, and so what you are doing is you are creating an object input stream from your byte array input stream, and then you are just doing a read object and typecasting and sending back, right? So our both decode and encode for both key and value is now ready. So since our codec is now ready, we are just going to pass the codec over here. So you can see that the error is gone and we are good. We are done with all the configuration part, and we are now going to do the get and the set method that we need for our application, right? So the first method that we need is a get method over here, public URL. So you'll pass me the key and you will get the value, right? So basically what we are going to do over here is we are going to go ahead and check. So stateful connection is now ready, and we are going to do a sync operation, and we are just doing a get over here, right? And we are doing a get with the key, and your codec will take care. It will serialize and send you back, so you'll have the URL and we can return the URL over here. Okay, so why did I take the URL into a variable? Could have directly returned, but just for our debugging purpose I didn't do that. So if my URL is equals null, or let's say it's not null, so we will log a message over here. So we are going to get an idea like what are we getting and what are we not getting. So let's put the key, added the key over here, right? So we are good with the get method over here, right? And next we need the set method, which will not return anything, and which will take we just need the URL object. We know how to get the key, right? We'll just use the URL as the key for now. So once again, we are going to use the stateful connection. We'll use the sync, and we'll do a set ex. Remember, we have to provide the time as well, right? And what do we do over here? URL.getString or get URL. We need to configure this TTL over here. So let's say TTL. So I have local variable and both instance type. That thing to do, but okay, fine for now. So what we'll do is time unit days to seconds, right? And we need it for this TTL number of days. So we are going to change this TTL number of days that we have got over here to seconds. So let's call it TTL seconds over here. Let's not have a conflict on the name, so we are good. Okay, so this will give a long value over here. So what we'll do is, just for our testing simplicity, let us hard code this for now. So let's say I am doing it only for 15 seconds, right? Okay, so we are going to hard code for 15 seconds, and then we are going to change it when we actually use it in our application. Okay, so we are good over here, right? So what we are going to do next is we are going to go ahead and change our service logic. So over to the URL service, and what we have been basically doing over here is we are going to hit the DB over here, right? So let us first auto-wrap the service. So let's put our cache service in place, right? And what we are going to do over here is, before hitting the database, we are just going to go ahead and look into our cache, right? So for each of the URL, we are going to repeat this activity. So cache service dot get, and we are going to get by the URL. If this is not null, that means value is there in our cache and we don't need to proceed any further, right? But why is this guy screaming over here? Okay, we need to pass him the key. So if it is not null, means data is there in the cache and we don't need to proceed any further. We know that this since we have eviction policy of 1 day, that means this URL has been processed in under 1 day, right? So we don't need to go ahead and do anything. So we can just simply return over here, right? So we don't need to do anything. If the URL is present in our cache, we are not doing anything. We are done, right? So let's say we have a cache miss over here and we go to the database and the existing URL is not null. That means something has been returned from the database which is not in our cache. So what we are going to do over here is we are going to put that into our cache, right? And we'll do it over here where it is already processed. So we are going to put cache service dot set, and we know what we need to put over here. We are going to put the existing URL, right? So that is one flow from where we are returning. In the other case, when we are saving into the DB, right, at that moment also we need to put this into our cache. So we'll set, and we are going to set the URL this time. Okay, so what we are going to do is we are going to comment out Kafka because we wanted to test only this database hit and cache miss part. So what we are going to do now is we are good with the service. So our service is fine. So one more thing, right? So last time when we started the Redis, what we did is we went inside the container and played around with the Redis, right? But this time we are going to do something a little different from what we have done earlier. So let's see what are the images that's running for us. We have MySQL only, so we are going to start Redis. And if you remember, what we did is we did docker run and then put the name, said that Redis, right? That's it we have done last time. And it started our container. It was fine, right? Even if you check from outside again, we have both the containers running. But that's not going to help us because we haven't given a port mapping, right? So our localhost port needs to be mapped with the container's port, right? So we are going to kill this container. And we are going to recreate the container again. So let me clear it off first. And what we are going to do is this command that we have used to create is fine. And along with that, what we'll just add is the port mapping over here. 6379 will be mapped to 6379 from the container, right? So if I start it now, what you will notice is, let me get outside this. Your port mapping is done. So localhost 6379 is mapped to your container 6379. So if we have started the container like we did in the earlier video, it's not going to help. So we have to give the port mapping over here, right? And now what we'll do is we'll also go inside the container so that we also get a first-hand experience of what's going on inside. So we are going to check the IP address first. So let's do a docker inspect Redis. So it's running on 172.17.03. So let's use this and connect. So again, docker run -it followed by the name of the container, then the command that we want to put Redis CLI, and then the host, that is 172.17.0.3. Okay, now we should be able to connect to Redis, and we are here. So you can just provide a pattern to check all the keys present. So there are no keys at the moment, and because we have not added anything, right? Before we run the application, what I'll do is we'll go ahead and change our 15 seconds to a longer time because it's too less to play around. So let's put it to 30 seconds, and we are going to run the application now. So let's head over to the application and let's run it. Okay, so the application is coming up now, and everything is empty. Our database is empty, our cache is empty, and we are good. Okay, so one thing to notice over here, that your post init is called, as you see over here from the cache service, right? So this is our package and class. This is the message that we wanted, right? So it seems everything is up and running fine. So let's head over to our Postman. So we are going to send a request over here, and we are going to send it with google.com over here. And so what will happen is it will check in the cache first. It won't be there. It will check in the DB. It won't be there. It will store in the DB. It will store in the cache. And next time when I send a google.com, it should serve me from the cache and does not hit the DB. Request sent. we can see that our application has stored it in the DB. We can see the query over here. So let's go ahead and check what happened in the cache. We can see a key over here. Amazing. So we have the data stored with us, right? Now if I send a google.com request again, so you can see over here that URL processed in 1 mil, serving from cache. So it's being served from our cache. For the next 30 seconds, it's going to always serve from our cache. And then it will be evicted from the cache and will not have it. So if you continuously send requests now, so let's send again and again. So you'll see that it's all being served from the cache. It's not going and hitting the database, right? And if I change the URL to say from google.com to something else, let's say Wikipedia. So now the request will go through, and if you look at your cache, you will have Wikipedia. Google is evicted because of the time limit. So now if I remove what we have done earlier, so let's go ahead and change it. So nothing will go up. So you'll see everything is being served from the cache, right? So let's quickly restart the application. So now we are going to send the request again. So let's try with Wikipedia. So first time it will go ahead and store in the DB. And now let's try out a bunch of URLs over here. So what we can do is we'll send out, say, google.com, say facebook.com. And if you see over here, so everything has gone inside, right, and stored in the DB. So if I send a Facebook now, you will immediately get serving from cache. No more processing, right? And over here into our cache, if you check for the keys that is there, so you'll see that everything is there, and they have the TTL, right? So if you want to see how long this key will live over here, so you can just put a TTL along with the key, so it is going to live for this many seconds, right? So our current configuration is our day's time, right? So it's not going to go ahead and evict it under a day, right? So every time if you change it, you will see that time is getting reduced 1 second each, right? So it's getting reduced second by second. So I hope you got a fair idea on how to integrate Redis using Lettuce, and how to configure it, how to store objects, how to deal with objects, and different configurations that we are using over here. Once again, all this code will be there in the repository, so please feel free to go ahead and check them out and download it if required. And do let me know if you have any question with any part of the integration. So in the next episode, what we'll try is we'll try to get rid of MySQL, and we'll move to Cassandra, as we have discussed on our looking back video, that MySQL was not a fair choice given this constraint and the scenarios we have in hand. So yeah, that's all from this video. Stay tuned, stay subscribed. So I have many things in mind. I have Kubernetes in mind, Mongo in mind, and many other things that we are going to use. There are many, there are several other frameworks and several other technologies that we are going to go ahead and explore from every different perspective, try to understand them, Nginx and all of them. So stay subscribed, stay safe, and we'll catch up soon again. Bye bye and take care.